Let's take a breath together. So just reminding us that our 2022 theme overall is Living Everyday Wonder. And each month we're going to focus on a different aspect of that. So February, we are focusing the whole month on the inner life. And what that looks like is, can I see God in me? Pause and find the cause. Like this microphone won't stay where I want it. Forgive and live, and the ultimate fear buster. So today what we're talking about is, can I see God in me? Which is a very different orientation for many of us raised here on planet Earth, because we've kind of been taught to see God somewhere else, right? We are literally spirit traveling in a physical body. Just like when we put our physical body in a vehicle and travel, everywhere we go, spirit goes, because it's a permanent residence in this physical vehicle. And we are so much more than just this physical body. So much more. But what? See, because that's where we struggle. Our whole orientation to the physical realm is the physical realm. Our whole orientation to this thing called humanity is an experience of limitation. And so it challenges us mentally to begin to wrap ourselves around we are absolute divinity. That human nature is not our nature. Human nature is conditioning. Human nature is what we've been taught. It is literally the limitation that we've been taught here on planet Earth. That really our nature is divinity. And that's where our true power lies. But it can be a long journey to get from that idea to a realization of it. And one of the things that can get in our way is this idea of personality. So here's how the glossary in the Science of Mind book defines personality. That which constitutes distinction of a person. Personality is the result of one's experience. It is the sum total of all they have said, done, felt, thought, hoped for, and believed in. It is the result of their reactions to the events of life. Factors to be considered in the development of personality are heredity, race suggestion, and that's talking about the collective consciousness. It's not talking about race as in skin color. It's talking about the suggestion of human race. And indeed, anything and everything that impinges or impacts consciousness. Therefore, we are what we are largely because the nature of our accumulated consciousness. Personality is the objective evidence of individuality. Our personality is the use we make of our divine individuality. Pay attention to that piece. We're going to come back and really unravel that. Right? Our personality is the use we make of our divine individuality. Just as a fine architecture uses only the best materials and plans most carefully how to construct their building, so we should, in the building of personality, choose most carefully the kind of materials we wish to use. Each one builds according to the pattern of their own desires. Now that's a lot to take in. New Thought Dictionary pares it down a little bit further with this. Personality is the use or misuse we make of consciousness expressing as us. Catch that? Use or misuse. Within each of us, there is a divine idea of life desiring to express itself. We tend to misperceive and even more inaccurately interpret this through our conditioned thinking. Personality has a possibility far beyond anything that is merely psychological or physiological. Instead of becoming a mask to hide reality, we are the possibility through which reality expresses. Our real personality is divinity. Our true personality is that inner self that many of us, quite tragically, have never met. We've never even paused long enough to consider that we are something more than what we've been taught we are. Right? When we're born into a physical body, and we're instantly labeled as male or female. And that comes with generations of conditioning about what a male and what a female is. Depending on what culture you're in, those can be very different paradigms. When you become a toddler, there's a whole paradigm of what a toddler is. Whether you exhibit those things or not is irrelevant. You will begin to exhibit those because you're constantly bombarded with the idea of a toddler. And so when you're constantly bombarded with how you should behave, lo and behold, you begin to behave like a toddler. Now, in all fairness, some of us are still there. We're just taller and way more. So how do we get out of all of this? How do we begin to shed all of the personality identities that we've been handed? It is not a small task to unravel all this stuff. Okay? We have to first understand this concept of oneness. And we have to understand that oneness has zero to do with sameness. Nothing. No two things in all of creation are identical. Not even identical twins are truly identical because they have their own mind and they have their own opinions. Right? They may have identical biological DNA, but they're not 100% identical. Nothing is. So how does oneness really work? Best way I can wrap myself around it and offer to you is some analogies here on planet Earth. You know, ice is made from water. No matter what form the ice takes, it's still water. Right? You can put it in whatever mold you want. It can be a spot on the sidewalk. It can be an icicle hanging from the tree. In multiplicity of forms, it's still one thing, water. And even though it appears separate, it's surrounded by water as moisture in the air. It's really that simple. And if we can get ourselves beyond the idea of the separate appearance of form, we can begin to understand oneness differently. That the quantum field, pure, unformed energy, the potential to create substance, unformed substance. We are all, everything that we will ever experience, everything that we are surrounded by is within the quantum field. there's no place to go outside of it that we can find. So perhaps the quantum field is the best place to look to understand this truth of oneness. Growing up, I heard this phrase, yeah, that'll happen when pigs fly. Right? Anybody else heard that? So here's the reality in terms of physics. Everything's flying all the time, including pigs, because no two molecules anywhere are actually touching. Sounds solid, feels solid, not solid. Now, I don't know about you, but that plays with my egoic little brain, right? So perhaps playing with it might be the entry point to understanding it, right? To literally, when you get in your vehicle to leave here, or when you're at home there, tap on a surface and just remind yourself, not solid. This truck I'm driving, not solid. Steering wheel I'm holding, not solid. Road I'm driving on, not solid. Because it's not. It's not. It is energy collapsed into form. It is vibrating at such a rate that it appears still and solid. We actually have instruments that can measure the movement of all life. This building has been here for a while. It's not in the same place it was when I was in here yesterday. But it moves so slowly that it's imperceptible to our human senses. It doesn't mean it's not moving. I think it was Einstein when someone asked him, what was the one thing he knew for sure? That everything is always moving. That everything is always moving. So we are within this field, collapsed into form by thought, vibrating at an individualized level that makes us show up the way we show up. Now, when we get to this idea of personality and the use or misuse of consciousness, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, if you will. All right, let me back up. Every thought that has ever been thunk in the history of humanity remains alive and active in collective consciousness. It has to. Because if the only mind is the eternal mind, to suggest that some thought could be erased would in fact erase eternality. And so every thought, no matter how holy or unholy it might have been, no matter how useful or misuse it might have been, is adding to the collective consciousness. There is no way to extricate ourselves from it. And so we study. When we understand that all of that we're swimming in it all the time, right? You ever have those moments where all of a sudden a thought just seems to come out of nowhere that you've never had before, and it's like, where did that come from? That's the collective consciousness just swimming by. It's a thought that has been thunk, and there it is. It doesn't mean we have to grab a hold of it, sit down and have dinner with it, make friends with it, make it part of us. It's already part of us. We don't have to give it any attention. We can just date myself. When the blimp first showed up, it had the marquee that used to scroll advertising across it, right? You can just watch it go by. You don't have to pause it. Oh, okay, let me write that down. Let me put that in my memory banks. It's already in there. You don't need to do that. What we need to do is know who we really are and to be able to discern what is our true nature from what is the conditioned nature. Right? It's not enough to come here on Sunday morning. It's just not. Let's use the analogy of our vehicles. You go buy a new vehicle, right? You drive it home. You don't just drive it home and park it. You use it. You don't fill it up with gas one time and then drive it until it stops and then walk away and go buy another one. You keep filling it up. You do maintenance on it to care for it so that it continues to provide you with reliable transportation. But we don't do that with ourselves and our spiritual journeys. We join some community, some spiritual path that enlightens us to a point, and then many of us go, okay, I got it. And we just go do that without continuing to nurture that, without continuing to study, without refilling our tank. We try to do it in separation. And I would love to tell you that works, but it doesn't. Because what happens is when we disconnect from what feeds us, what we focus on is what we're immersed in. And what we're going to be immersed in here on planet Earth is conditioned life. Unless we extricate ourselves to a monastery where we're no longer impacted by race consciousness, where we're no longer impacted by what happens around us, we need to stay connected. We need the safety and the vulnerability of authentic community where we can reach out to somebody, and I have done this with my ministerial colleagues. When I lose my way and my human emotions are running the show, sometimes it's, hey, I need some help here because I'm about to slap the face of God. Right? Because it happens. It happens. Because not everybody even cares about being kind. Not everybody cares about being conscious. And so we lift each other up and we help each other navigate. That's what the Bible talks about when it says we are in the world but not of the world. And so we have to come together and keep reminding each other. We keep studying because there's always more to learn. Mostly because we are in these vehicles that are really good at forgetting. We learn and we forget. We remember and we forget. We remember and we forget. It's not an arrival, it's a journey. So I want to offer you to recognize that when we first start letting go of that God outside of us, because in all fairness, that's really attractive sometimes, to have a God that embodies a human personality, that feels like a friend that we can go to when we're really challenged with what's happening here on planet Earth. That's an attractive proposition. And I invite you to consider that the more personal you make your relationship with your inner self, the closer that relationship becomes. That a God outside of you actually detaches you to some degree from your power and your presence that is always available to you in every moment. That if we'll go through the grief, and there is some grief on the human level, of giving up that comfort zone of something outside of us that's going to fix everything. Right? Yep, here comes the R word. That we are responsible. That there's nothing outside of us that is going to take our responsibility and make our lives better without our participation. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We get to learn how to have an I-thou relationship. Prayer becomes communion instead of beseeching. Meditation becomes a time of communion, of listening to what is closer than your own breath, your own self. Every answer that you've ever looked for, you already are. It's not that you already have it, you already are it. And to allow yourself to embody that. Ernest Holmes says this: the wave rises from the ocean of infinity and personifies itself through all people. Hence, it is personal to all who sense its presence. Allow yourself to sense it, to know it, to feel it, to move beyond the limited version of you that you've been taught. How do we do that? You get to play with some silliness. This is God, using God as a clicker, to change God as the PowerPoint, to put God's picture of itself on the wall that is God. When you have breakfast, if you're having a bowl of cereal, this is God pouring God onto God, having God for breakfast. I invite you to play with it because it's true. And yes, in the back of your mind, your egoic brain's going to go, "You have lost your mind." And I hear my friend Jeffrey saying, "You say that like it's a bad thing." Perhaps we have to lose our human mind to find our divine mind. Perhaps. So I'm going to begin to wrap up with this quote from A New Design for Living. If once we let ourselves get past outward appearances of the individual, we come to understand that life at the center of its being is the same at the center of our being. Life which is never in conflict with itself, never in a state of disharmony. We need never view human personality as something unreal or unworthy, but rather as an individualization of divinity. It is the universal spirit that is incarnated in each one in a unique way that gives warmth, color, and variation to that which otherwise would be an eternal monotony. You are a divine idea in the mind of God. You are here because creation wants to experience itself as you. It gave you everything that it is and then let go so that you can choose. You have the full power of choice to choose whatever you choose. And it just absorbs the experience. It expands itself as the experience of you. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't keep score. That's a lie. There's no place of hell it's going to send you. We take ourselves there mentally. It simply expands its experience of itself as you. so we know if we're experiencing disharmony or discontent, we're out of alignment with ourself. The only place I know to get realigned is through that journey inward. Through moving beyond the human stuff. And I do that with other folks. I do that by talking to people. I do that by prayer and meditation. I do that by singing. I do that by fishing. I do that by listening. I do that by being present in that I-thou relationship. In the communion, the preciousness of the one that is all. So this week, you get to play with a couple of questions. Where in my human personality is conflict? Where is my human personality in conflict with my divine personality? Right? Which one am I giving power to? How will my relationships change if I align my human personality with my divine personality? And lastly, am I really willing to change my thinking? Am I really willing? Or do I just want to talk about changing, but I don't really want to change anything? Spend some time with those. Be honest with yourself. Be courageously honest. Because until we get real, nothing's real. Let's take this into prayer. So this breath, I recognize, is the infinite breathing me. That all that it is, the perfect intelligence, the perfect peace, the infinite abundance, life itself is my life. That I am an individualized expression of it, never separate from it, fully infused by all that it is. The power of creation itself is my power. And what is true of me is true of all. Each individualized expression, a magnificent, glorious, exquisitely individualized desire in the heart of life itself to live itself. Individualized, specialized, uniquely, expanding its experience of itself. And so I speak my word, claiming and affirming that everything unlike that comes to the surface, to the awareness of humanity, to be moved out of the way. That our relationship as humans is changing to one of wholeness, to one that recognizes, that sees the God in me, so that I can see the God in you, so that I can see God everywhere. And as I see it, I experience it. And as I experience it, I live it. And as I live it, life heals itself in this physical realm. I celebrate the simplicity of creation and the complexity of the human journey. I celebrate the both and I celebrate that truth is always known within itself. Always. And so knowing this to be true, I can let go. I can let go knowing that the word spoken is the word fulfilled. The timeline is none of my business. And so I let it go, trusting that it is. And I invite you to join me as we say together, and so it is.